The clay spun cool and smooth beneath Elena Vargas's hands, a familiar comfort in the Seville heat that pressed against the open door of her small studio. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight slicing through the shutters, illuminating the shelves lined with terracotta pots, glazed tiles, and half-finished figures. Outside, the scent of orange blossoms mingled with the faint aroma of churros from a nearby stall. The sounds of the Triana neighborhood a constant, vibrant hum. Here, amidst the earthy smell of damp clay and the quiet focus of creation, Elena felt most herself. Her dark hair was tied back loosely, stray wisps clinging to her temples, and a smudge of reddish clay decorated her cheekbone like a tribal marking. She coaxed the spinning mound upwards, her movements practiced, fluid, a conversation between her fingers and the earth. This rhythm, this connection, was an inheritance from her abuela, whose spirit felt ever present in the worn wooden tools and the ancient, slightly temperamental kiln slumbering in the corner. Mateo was due back today, her husband. The thought brought a warmth that spread through her chest, a counterpoint to the clay's coolness. Mateo Alvarez, with his easy charm and sharp suits, a man who seemed slightly too polished for her earthy world, yet who had swept into her life during the Feria de Abril 3 years ago like a whirlwind, all passionate declarations and promises whispered under starry Andalusian nights. He worked in international sales, necessitating frequent trips, Madrid, Barcelona, sometimes further afield. Elena missed him during his absences, the apartment overlooking the bustling Plaza del Salvador, feeling too large, too quiet without his presence. But his returns were always filled with intensity, with gifts, with reassurances that made the loneliness fade. She finished shaping the lip of the vase, a simple, elegant curve, and smiled. He would like this one. Later that evening, the apartment buzzed with Mateo's energy. He'd arrived bearing flowers and stories of deals closed in Milan, his handsome face animated as he spoke. He held Elena close, burying his face in her hair. "Ah, mi vida! How I've missed the smell of you, of clay and Seville," he murmured. Elena leaned into him, soaking in his presence. She waited until they were sharing tapas and a bottle of Rioja on their small balcony, the plaza below alive with evening strollers, before telling him her news. "Mateo," she began, her heart thrumming. I'm pregnant." His reaction was everything she'd hoped for. His eyes widened, then a brilliant smile broke across his face. He pulled her into a fierce hug, lifting her slightly off her feet. "Pregnant? Elena! Dios mío! This is wonderful! Amazing!" He peppered her face with kisses, his joy seeming boundless. "A baby, our baby!" Relief washed over her, sweet and profound. They talked late into the night, making plans, dreaming names, Mateo's enthusiasm a bright, infectious flame. He was attentive, loving, exactly the partner she envisioned sharing this journey with. A few days later, the first discordant note sounded, so subtle Elena almost missed it. "Did you remember to call the plumber about the dripping tap?" Mateo asked casually over breakfast. Elena frowned. "The plumber? No, you said you'd handle it before your trip." He chuckled, shaking his head slightly. "Me? No, Elena, I distinctly remember asking you to do it. We talked about it right here." He gestured towards the kitchen counter. "No, Mateo, I'm sure," she started, but trailed off. Had she forgotten? Pregnancy brain, perhaps. She felt a flicker of unease, but pushed it away. Mateo was already changing the subject, talking about a meeting he had. It was nothing. Current part characters, 3,880. Total characters, 38 and 80. But it wasn't nothing. Similar instances began to accumulate. Small pebbles of doubt dropped into the smooth pool of her contentment. Her keys weren't on the hook where she always left them. Mateo found them later under a cushion, teasingly asking if she was becoming absent-minded already. He denied conversations she was certain they'd had about weekend plans. "Elena, mi amor, you seem tired." He'd say, his voice laced with concern that felt slightly off. "Are you sure you remember correctly? Maybe you dreamt it." Each time his certainty chipped away at hers. She started writing things down, appointment times, agreements, but even then he'd find ways to sow confusion. "Ah, you wrote Tuesday? I definitely said Thursday, Carino. Perhaps you misheard." He'd touch her cheek gently, his eyes full of apparent sympathy that made her feel simultaneously cherished and foolish. The anxiety began to coil in her stomach, a constant low hum beneath the surface of her days. It seeped into her work. A delicate bowl cracked inexplicably in the drying phase. The glaze on a set of tiles blistered unevenly. Her hands, usually so steady, felt clumsy, disconnected. She found herself staring blankly at the spinning wheel, the shapes refusing to emerge as intended. One afternoon, after dropping a nearly finished sculpture, shattering it on the studio floor, she sank onto a stool, tears blurring her vision. Signora Isabella Montoya, her neighbour whose herbolario perfumed the small alleyway with the scents of dried lavender, chamomile and something deeper, more mysterious, found her like that. Isabella, a woman whose face was a roadmap of Seville's sun and shadows, her eyes missing nothing, entered quietly. She didn't pry, simply started sweeping up the larger fragments of clay. "The clay has a memory, Elena," she said softly, her voice raspy like dried leaves. "It remembers the tension in the hands that shape it." Elena wiped her eyes, embarrassed. "I'm just clumsy today, Signora, and tired." Isabella paused, leaning on her broom. "Tired? Yes. But it is more than that, no?" She looked directly at Elena. "Sometimes the brightest sun casts the darkest shadows, child." Elena confided then haltingly about the forgetfulness, the confusion, Matteo's gentle insistence that her memory was failing her. She didn't mention suspicion, not yet, just the unsettling feeling of losing her grip. Isabella listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Elena finished, she simply nodded. "Pregnancy can cloud the mind," she acknowledged. "But so can other things." She went back to her shop and returned with a small muslin bag filled with dried herbs. "Tila and Melissa," she explained, "for the nerves. Drink it before sleep." Her gaze lingered on Elena for a moment. "And keep your eyes open, Hija, not just the ones in your head. Current part characters, 3,653. Total characters, 7,533. Matteo's trips continued. He'd call frequently, his voice solicitous, asking if she was resting, if she needed anything, reminding her to take it easy. Yet the small inconsistencies persisted. One Saturday, while clearing out receipts for Matteo's expense report, Elena found one tucked away in his briefcase from Ristorante Abades Triana, an expensive place overlooking the Guadalquivir. It was dated for an evening 2 weeks prior, an evening Matteo had supposedly spent working late at a conference in Madrid. Her breath hitched. She remembered that night clearly. He'd called, sounding tired, describing the boring hotel room. Why lie about dinner in Seville? She confronted him when he returned, holding the receipt like evidence. Matteo laughed it off, a smooth, dismissive sound. "Ah, that! I forgot to mention. The Madrid conference ended early, so I flew back a night sooner, surprised a client with dinner. It was purely business, Elena, terribly dull. I didn't want to bore you with the details." He kissed her forehead. "You worry too much, mi vida." His explanation was plausible, almost too plausible. But the seed of suspicion, once planted, began to root. The true turning point came unexpectedly. Matteo was away again, this time in Barcelona. Elena felt a sudden wave of nausea, stronger than usual. Rummaging in Matteo's travel toiletry bag for a forgotten antacid tablet he sometimes carried, her fingers brushed against a small, unfamiliar blister pack hidden beneath his shaving kit. She pulled it out. Lorazepam, small white pills clearly labelled, anxiety medication. Medication she had never been prescribed, had never seen him take. He'd always scoffed at such things, priding himself on his resilience. Why did he have it, and why hide it? He'd been offering her calming chamomile tea frequently lately, brewing it himself with solicitous care. Could he? The thought was monstrous, unthinkable. Was he trying to drug her? To make her genuinely confused and sleepy? She took the packet to Isabella, her hands trembling. The old woman examined the pills, her lips tightening. "Lorazepam," she confirmed, her voice low. "To calm the nerves, or to cloud the mind. Often given to agitated patients. Not something a healthy man hides." She looked sharply at Elena. "He offers you tea often, you said?" Elena nodded numbly. Isabella's eyes, usually just observant, now held a flicker of something like anger. "Be careful what you drink. Trust what your own hands prepare." The monstrous thought solidified into a terrifying certainty. Matteo wasn't just dismissive, he was actively manipulating her, trying to make her seem unstable. But why? The affair she hadn't let herself truly consider now seemed horribly likely. He wanted out, and he wanted to ensure he looked like the caring husband dealing with an unraveling wife, perhaps even using her instability to gain advantage in a separation, maybe even concerning the baby. The cruelty of it stole her breath. The betrayal felt like a physical blow, shattering the loving image she held of him into 1,000 jagged pieces. Grief warred with a rising tide of cold fury. She wouldn't let him. She wouldn't let him break her or take her child's future. The confusion that had plagued her began to recede, replaced by a sharp, almost painful clarity. Her abuela used to say, when the kiln fire is hottest, the clay becomes strongest. Elena felt that fire igniting within her now. She needed proof, undeniable proof. Her investigation began with a chilling precision. Waiting until Mateo was sound asleep after his return from Barcelona, feigning deep slumber herself, Elena carefully slipped out of bed. His laptop lay closed on the desk in their small study. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, guessing his password. Ridiculously, it was still the anniversary of their first date at the Feria. She navigated quickly to his emails, his messages. Her breath caught. There it was, a stream of messages, not just emails but WhatsApp chats synced to the desktop between Mateo and Sofia Reyes. Sofia, the perfectly coiffed daughter of one of his firm's major clients, a woman Elena had met a handful of times at company functions, always finding her vaguely condescending. The messages were sickeningly affectionate, full of shared jokes and future plans. And then the damning evidence. Mateo complaining about Elena's mood swings since the pregnancy. Sofia offering faux sympathy, Mateo mentioning how difficult Elena was becoming, how she was forgetting things constantly. Then, the explicit discussion. Mateo, it's getting harder. She's suspicious about everything. I need this to look like her idea, her breakdown. Just keep up the pressure, darling. A little more confusion, maybe suggest she sees Dr. Ramirez. He's very understanding. Good idea. Found some old lorazepam. Might help calm her nerves if she gets too agitated. Perfect. Soon this will all be behind us. Just us. Soon the Feria is coming up. The family expects us there. After that, we make our move. Elena felt bile rise in her throat. He wasn't just gaslighting her. He was potentially drugging her, planning to use her pregnancy hormones against her, painting her as mentally unstable to his family, possibly to doctors, all to facilitate his exit into Sofia's arms without blame or complication. The calculated cruelty was breathtaking. She quickly took photos of the screen with her phone, her hands shaking so badly the first few were blurred. She saved everything, logged out, wiped the recent history, and crept back into bed, lying rigid beside the man who was systematically trying to destroy her reality. Sleep was impossible. The image of his sleeping face, usually a source of comfort, now seemed like a grotesque mask. The next morning she visited Isabella again, not with confusion but with cold resolve. She didn't show the messages, just stated flatly, "You were right, Signora. It is not just pregnancy." Isabella searched her face. "You know?" "I know," Elena confirmed. "He has another woman. He is trying to make me seem unwell, before he leaves." Isabella nodded slowly, her expression grim. "Some men are cowards wrapped in charm, Elena. They break things rather than face their own weakness." She placed a gnarled hand over Elena's. "What will you do?" "The Feria de Abril starts next week," Elena said, her voice steady. "His family will be there. Everyone will be there. He wants appearances. He will get them." Isabella held her gaze. "Clay, once fired, cannot be easily reshaped," she murmured, "but it can be displayed for all to see its true form. Be careful, Hija. Fire can purify, but it can also consume." Elena nodded. "I know, but I won't be the one consumed." She spent the following days meticulously preparing. She backed up the photos and audio recordings she managed to capture using a tiny device hidden in a ceramic bird in their living room. Snippets of Mateo's dismissive comments, his false reassurances, one damning phone call with Sofia planning their post-Feria future. She contacted a lawyer specializing in family law, explaining the situation, providing the initial evidence. The lawyer was cautiously optimistic, but stressed the need for irrefutable proof, especially regarding the gaslighting and potential drugging. The public confrontation Elena envisioned was risky, but potentially powerful. Elena also threw herself into her work, but with a different energy. She began crafting a large, intricate platter, its design fierce, almost aggressive, swirling patterns like storm clouds, glazed in deep blues and fiery oranges. It felt like channeling her rage into the clay. The Feria de Abril arrived, transforming Seville into a kaleidoscope of colour, music and tradition. Paper lanterns glowed. The scent of fried fish and sweet wine hung heavy in the air, and the rhythmic clapping of flamenco echoed from the casetas, the private tents where families gathered to celebrate. Mateo insisted they attend the Alvarez family caseta on the second night, a major social event. He was particularly attentive, holding Elena's arm possessively, introducing her with pride, playing the doting husband-to-be father to perfection. His performance was flawless, sickeningly so. Elena moved through the crowded tent, accepting congratulations on the pregnancy, smiling until her cheeks ached, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She saw Sofia Reyes across the room, holding court with a group of friends, occasionally casting smug, knowing glances towards Mateo. Elena carried the large platter she had made, wrapped carefully. It was her centerpiece, she'd told Mateo, a gift for his parents. He'd praised its beauty, oblivious to the storm depicted in its glaze. Isabella's warning echoed in her mind. Fire can purify, but it can also consume. She took a deep breath, grounding herself. The moment came after dinner, during a lull in the flamenco performance. Mateo's father, Don Rafael Alvarez, a stern man who valued reputation above all, raised his glass for a toast. To family, he began, and to the newest generation soon to join us. To Mateo and Elena. Applause rippled through the caseta. Mateo beamed, pulling Elena closer, kissing her temple. "Thank you, Papa. We are so blessed." He looked around, his gaze sweeping over the assembled family and influential guests. This was his stage. Elena gently disentangled herself. "Thank you, Don Rafael," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the polite murmurs. All eyes turned to her. Mateo's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Before we continue the celebration," Elena went on, holding up the platter, "I also have something to share, something about the truth behind the appearances we maintain." A confused silence fell. Mateo shot her a warning look, whispering, "Elena, what are you doing? Are you feeling all right?" His voice held that familiar note of feigned concern, aimed at the audience. "I feel perfectly clear, Mateo," Elena replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Clearer than I have in months. Because I finally understand the game you've been playing." She unwrapped the platter, revealing its turbulent design. "You see this?" she asked the crowd, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "This is what betrayal looks like, what it feels like to have your reality systematically undermined by the person you trust most." "Elena!" Mateo hissed, stepping towards her, trying to take her arm. "You're not well. Let's go outside." "No," Elena said firmly, pulling her arm away. She addressed the stunned onlookers. "My husband, the devoted family man, has been having an affair with Sofia Reyes." She gestured towards Sofia, whose face had gone deathly pale. Gasps rippled through the tent. But that wasn't enough. To ensure a smooth exit without blame, he decided to make me seem unstable. He moved things, denied conversations, made me doubt my own memory. Current part characters, 1,393 total characters, 2,134. He even hid medication, Elena continued, her voice gaining strength. Lorazepam, hoping perhaps I'd take the calming tea he so thoughtfully prepared, further clouding my mind. She saw Mateo's face contort, his mask of charm shattering, replaced by raw fury. Don Rafael looked thunderstruck, his gaze flicking between his son and the pale Sofia. "This is absurd," Mateo finally exploded, his voice tight with rage. "She's hysterical! The pregnancy hormones! She's imagining things! Someone help her!" He appealed to the crowd, trying to regain control. "Am I imagining this, Mateo?" Elena countered calmly. She reached into her small evening bag and pulled out her phone and a tiny portable speaker. "Perhaps you'd all like to hear Mateo confirming his plans with Sofia?" She pressed play. Mateo's voice filled the sudden, absolute silence of the caseta. "Audio. Need this to look like her idea, her breakdown." Sofia's voice answered, cool and clear. Audio. "Just keep up the pressure, darling. Suggest she sees Dr. Ramirez." Then Mateo again, chillingly casual. "Found some old lorazepam. Might help calm her nerves. After the feria, we make our move." Elena stopped the recording. The silence stretched, thick with shock and disbelief. Every eye was fixed on Mateo and Sofia. Sofia looked ready to faint, while Mateo stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief turning into sheer, cornered panic. Don Rafael stared at his son, his expression hardening into cold contempt. Mateo's mother let out a small, wounded cry. "I also have messages," Elena added quietly, holding up her phone, showing the screen to those nearest, and the pills themselves. She didn't need to show them. The recording was enough. The carefully constructed facade of Mateo Alvarez had crumbled into dust in the space of 2 minutes, under the bright lights of his family's caseta. The whispers started then, a low, rising tide of outrage and disgust. People turned away from Mateo, from Sofia. Sofia, unable to bear the scrutiny, mumbled an incoherent excuse and practically fled the tent, pushing through the stunned crowd. Mateo stood rooted to the spot, his face flushed, his eyes darting around wildly, finding no sympathy, only judgment. His father turned his back on him, a gesture more damning than any words. Elena watched him, not with triumph, but with a deep, aching sadness for the man she thought she knew, mixed with the fierce, clean burn of vindication. She had spoken her truth. She had reclaimed her reality. She turned, picked up her platter, her storm made manifest, and walked steadily out of Caseta, leaving the wreckage of Mateo's reputation behind her. She didn't look back. Outside the tent, the Feria music played on, oblivious, but for Elena, the world had irrevocably shifted. She walked towards the edge of the fairgrounds, breathing in the night air, the scent of orange blossom suddenly seeming sharper, clearer. She saw Isabella waiting near the entrance, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her expression calm. She simply nodded as Elena approached, a silent acknowledgement of the storm past. The aftermath was swift and brutal, exactly as the public nature of the confrontation ensured in the close-knit, reputation-conscious circles of Seville society. The story spread like wildfire through the Feria grounds and beyond. Mateo Alvarez became an overnight pariah. His family, deeply shamed, publicly distanced themselves. Don Rafael, valuing the family name above his son's denials, reportedly cut him off financially and professionally. Mateo's charm couldn't penetrate the wall of social ostracization. His career, reliant on connections and trust, stalled. Sofia Reyes suffered a similar fate. Her family, embarrassed by the scandal, whisked her away on an extended trip abroad. Their affair, built on deceit and convenience, likely imploded under the weight of the scandal. Elena, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding. The legal proceedings for the divorce were straightforward, almost anticlimactic after the public drama. Mateo, stripped of his social standing and facing pressure from his own family, offered little resistance. Elena secured the divorce, financial independence through the division of assets, and sole custody rights, ensuring Mateo would have no claim on the child born from such betrayal. She didn't ask for punitive damages. The public disgrace felt like justice enough. She returned to her studio, the place that had always been her sanctuary. For a few days, she couldn't touch the clay. The violation felt too deep, the memory of Mateo's hands, once loving, now tainted. She looked at the platter she had carried to the Feria, the storm platter. In a moment of catharsis, she took a hammer and smashed it, the sharp cracks echoing the breaks within her own life. But then, carefully, she gathered the shards. Weeks turned into months. Elena's belly grew, a constant reminder of the new life burgeoning within her, a life she would protect fiercely. She began working again, slowly at first. She took the broken pieces of the storm platter and incorporated them into a new mosaic, embedding them amidst patterns of burgeoning flowers and calm, sun-drenched landscapes. It was an act of transformation, of acknowledging the damage but refusing to be defined by it. Her new work held a different quality, a depth, a resilience, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. Her pieces began to sell well, attracting attention beyond her usual local clientele. Senora Isabella remained a quiet, constant presence. She brought Elena nourishing broths, shared stories of her own long life, its joys and sorrows, and offered practical advice without judgment. She became the grandmother figure Elena had lost, a steady anchor in the shifting tides of her new reality. Isabella never directly mentioned Mateo again, but sometimes watching Elena work, she would nod slowly, a look of quiet satisfaction in her eyes. "The strongest pots," she remarked one afternoon, watching Elena glaze a series of small, hopeful-looking bird figures, "are those fired in the hottest kiln." Life settled into a new rhythm, quieter than before, yet richer. Elena found peace in the familiar weight of the clay, in the steady routine of her studio, in the supportive presence of Isabella, and in the gentle kicks and flutters within her womb. The vibrant pulse of Seville continued around her. The clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones, the passionate strains of flamenco drifting from distant windows, the pervasive scent of jasmine and oranges. But now it felt less like a backdrop to her life with Matteo, and more like the supportive embrace of her city, her home. One sun-drenched afternoon, months later, Elena stood back from her wheel, surveying her studio. Sunlight streamed through the open door, illuminating rows of finished pottery, pieces marked by resilience, pieces telling a story of survival and renewal. She was visibly pregnant now, her body round and full of promise. She placed a hand protectively over her belly, feeling a strong kick in response. A small smile touched her lips. She caught Isabella's eye through the open doorway of the herbalario. The old woman was watching her, a faint smile mirroring Elena's own. Isabella gave a slow, deliberate nod, a gesture of approval, of shared understanding, of faith in the future. Elena turned back to her work. She picked up a lump of fresh clay, its cool, damp earthiness grounding her. Her hands, steady and sure, once more began to work, shaping the future, one careful movement at a time. The storm had passed, the fire had tested her, and like the clay she loved, she had been reshaped, not broken, emerging stronger, ready for the life she was now building for herself and her child under the warm Andalusian sun. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Single motherhood rarely was, but it was hers, forged in fire, shaped by her own hands.